Hey there, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Delighted to be joined by Ryan Grimm, the DC bureau chief of The Intercept, also co-host at Breaking Points, Counterpoints, and now, well, you've been an author, but your
Still an author.
Latest book, The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution, which seems to be out at a pretty good time because with all the horrors going on in Israel and their slaughter and genocide, in my view, of Gaza, this seems to be one of the few things the Squad is kind of aligned on. Although from what I'm hearing, they might have voted president on something today. I'll have to look into that. But I want to start with, full disclosure, I haven't read the book, but it's on my Hanukkah list. I've read the articles about the book. There was one part that really stood out to me. I know Pelosi is not a boomer; she's of the generation before that. But apparently, there's a part of your book that reveals Pelosi thought that AOC's "Abolish ICE" sloganeering might be coming from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe
that?
Right.
Yeah, that's in the first time that they officially met. So one of the only phone calls, she took basically two phone calls, after she beat Joe Crowley. One was from Bernie Sanders because she was, a huge Bernie Sanders supporter and volunteer. So she's going to take that. And then the other call she took was Nancy Pelosi, who's, going to potentially be the House Speaker. And that's when Pelosi was like, "Yeah, we got too many old white guys in there anyway." Kind of bucking her up. And Joe Crowley was a rival of Pelosi's. Like Pelosi must have been thrilled that night to see that rival eliminated. And then a couple months later, AOC's out in San Francisco, and she and Shroykot Chakrabarty, who becomes her chief of staff, and Nancy Pelosi and Christine Pelosi, Nancy's daughter, have lunch. And it was during that lunch where Pelosi just tells her, and you the way you've seen Pelosi speak in interviews and at press conferences is how Shroykot described her speaking at this lunch too. Just these looping, run-on circular sentences that often do end up landing in an interesting place, but you kind of have to watch them the whole time. And you don't quite know where they're going. And one of them winds up with her just matter-of-factly stating that, the Russians are the ones that injected the phrase "abolish ICE" into our discourse. And, we as Democrats need to do everything we can to get rid of that, get that out of there. And this is, 2018. So we're still at the height of like Russiomania at the time. And of course, AOC had not organized her entire campaign around "abolish ICE" by any stretch of the imagination, but she had used the phrase, and it was central to the campaign in the sense that news coverage kind of pushed it to the center. If you remember that time, and there was that famous photo of her going down and visiting the Trump's kind of cages that he's had for migrant families and children who were separated at the time. And because that was so much in the news, that did drive a significant amount of like the debate between her and Joe Crowley. But yeah, that was a moment where she meets with Pelosi and she's like, "Wow, okay, it's kind of like talking to a boomer MSNBC viewer who's like been absorbing a lot of the kind of MSNBC commentary." You're like, okay, I get why they think that, but this is going to be the Speaker of the House who thinks that. Right. That's a real kind of wake up call. Whoa.
Right. And another interesting thing, I think a lot of progressives who have fallen out of love with AOC and the Squad, they kind of look at maybe where things started falling off the track. The pinnacle was when AOC got in, actually perhaps before she even was sworn in.
Yeah, it's a week after she wasn't even sworn in yet.
Yeah, but her joining the Sunrise Movement protesters outside Pelosi's office because people thought, oh, she's actually going to be an activist and, kind of be aggressive against the Democratic establishment. Your book reveals that, I don't know if AOC miscalculated, but she thought that Pelosi might actually appreciate that she was doing that.
Well, she thought, she definitely knew so here's what I mean by that. So she definitely knew that Pelosi would be, upset about it. And like, as she's leaving, she's like, I've got a luncheon later today with Nancy Pelosi. That ought to be interesting. Like she knew that like in the immediate term that definitely this was going to ruffle a lot of feathers, and she didn't know, how badly, but she knew it would. But her hope was still that Pelosi would recognize that she was coming from a good place, and that she was kind of trying to create enough energy around climate that Pelosi would then have the capital to do what Pelosi wanted to do, which is aggressively fight climate change. So I think when she came in, she really did feel like everybody else was in it, or a lot of the other people were in it for the same reasons that she was. Like the reasons that people say that they're in it. We're all here together fighting for the same thing. You have a different generational perspective on this. You have different funding sources. Maybe, Bernie and I can bring in different funding sources for you. We can step away from some of this fossil fuel money, and that'll help us all get to the same place that we all say we want to get to. And I think she believes that much less now. But at the time, really, really took people at their word when they were saying that they wanted to address these crises.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just Pelosi. There was kind of I don't know, seems like some petty high school tension coming from Pramila Jayapal against AOC.
And not just Jayapal, but like what she eventually learned is that, and I highlight the one thing around Jayapal where she had been a climate, champion, and like that was her issue. And there's a lot of, when you're in the House, there's a lot of stuff of like, well, I had an event. Why weren't you at my event? I held a press conference. I didn't invite these people. Why wasn't I invited to this press conference? I'm the Medicare for All person. Like, so why are you doing this? Like territorial stuff that when you see it up front, you're like, well, of course these are human beings. Of course they're territorial, just like in an office or just in like an organization, just like in a high school. But from those who are coming from the outside and seeing it as just, a coalition that's on a mission to enact an agenda, you're shocked at first about when you see all of the different rules that are in place.
Mm-hmm. And can you kind of talk about, because it seems that AOC, not just her, but other squad members, they were kind of riding off of the Bernie movement, I think in a good way, and might have not been prepared for the pushback they were going to get when they decided not to vote as a bloc, when they kind of decided to go the other route, which was trying to forge relationships with their colleagues, not be as adversarial. It seems like they weren't prepared for the amount of backlash they were going to get, whether that backlash was completely fair or not. Did you get any insight into? Because it seems like when I watched AOC, actually, we have one clip. This is her in an Instagram kind of responding to someone. I think it was over forced to vote criticism and other things, but why? Oh, it was after the Freedom Caucus basically held McCarthy's speakership hostage, and he had to go 15 rounds. Somebody was asking AOC, well, why don't you guys do something like that? Let's take a listen.
I see some people say, Dems should negotiate to get concessions. We do all the time. But what we don't do is bring them publicly in order to empower not just Republicans, but the fascist flank of the Republican Party. And ironically, a lot of the concessions that Kevin McCarthy, in nature, they're not the same ones, of course, but the nature of some of these concessions actually do overlap with some of the concessions that have been the subject of private negotiations on the Democratic side. We have also negotiated for certain budgetary, we have negotiated for certain budgetary rules. We've negotiated there have been negotiations around committees, budgetary rules, and very similar kind of scopes and areas. But we do that prior to getting to the floor vote.
So no surprise to you that doesn't land so hot for today's leftist. But did you get any insight? Because it just seemed like, maybe I'm wrong, it didn't seem like they were expecting that kind of backlash.
Right. And she talked about it a little bit for the book where, and it was reflective of other comments that she made there and elsewhere, where there was a frustration from her, Jayapal, the rest of the squad, and others, during in particular, the 2020, 2021 period, because they had been doing, like you said, like she said there, they were doing a lot of kind of behind the scenes negotiating, saying like, here are the rules changes that we want. Here's the block of votes that we can deliver if you get those. Their rationale for not doing it publicly was that then if they do, the blue dogs will then know what the progressives are asking for and will make a condition for their votes that you don't do this budgetary thing or this committee thing or whatever it was. And so there was this frustration that they're like, we agree with the idea of using leverage. But these are the things we're fighting for, rather than say like a floor vote on Medicare for all. The problem, as I would identify it, is there was just a complete lack of organization or communication with the folks on the outside who wanted to see something done and the folks on the inside. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when the Democratic Party and the progressive liberal organizations were big, real, you'd have steering committees made up of civil rights organizations, environmental organizations, unions that had grassroots bases, that had significant funding, that had offices and staffers, and they would meet and decide on tactics, and then they would communicate out, to their members, and the members would, if they were supportive of that, would be like, all right, let's do what we can as foot soldiers to kind of drive this forward. There's nothing like that exists now. There is a little bit of it on the right, and most of it kind of runs through Steve Bannon's podcast, which has this massive following. It comes out basically every day. He's got Freedom Caucus people who come on the podcast. They talk about what their strategy is, what they're going to do over the next couple of weeks, and they talk about what the audience can do. They call them the posse. They're going to call these particular members of Congress. They're going to send these letters. They're going to go to congressional offices. What they're going to primary this person. They're very explicit about what their strategy is, and that way, the Freedom Caucus on the inside has this outside support, and the people on the outside keep the faith that there are people on the inside who share their agenda and share their mission. And
right.
So it keeps them together as a unified organic block. Whereas so many times you saw, and AOC's talked about this too, but they would only be kind of reactive. And the squad would be reacting to Twitter, which would be reacting to something that the squad had done. And it would just be this kind of vicious cycle. And there just isn't, maybe there eventually could be, and I think there needs to be on the left, that type of mechanism, that type of ability for there to be that interaction. Because otherwise, all you have left is social media. And social
right.
media is basically not capable of proactively, the force the vote thing would be one of the rare instances where an idea bubbles up. Let's do this thing. And then let's try to pressure members of Congress to do this thing and use their leverage to pressure other members of Congress. But by the time that was out, they were already deep into their negotiations over other things using that exact same leverage. So it was
right.
it was really set up to fail in a bad way.
Did you find that, because people focus so much on the vote and how they could vote as a block, but obviously there's other things they could do. One thing I noticed was rarely, and Bernie, has a long tradition of this too. Rarely did they choose to actually, forcefully go after Biden in the media.
Mm-hmm.
One example is, pretty early on in his term, 2021, he just unilaterally surrendered on a $15 minimum wage. Just, the parliamentarian, yada, yada. of course, it was a tough time, and understandably, they are not, the Tea Party Freedom Caucus. They wanted to get relief to people for COVID quickly, but it's not like, if AOC or these others pick up the phone, they can't get on CNN, MSNBC, push Biden. They don't need to, do it in a, Jimmy Dore, burn it down style, but somewhere in the middle, and, point out Trump fired his parliamentarian. It just seemed like so many times, for example, when Manchin was blocking the child tax credit expiration, that's where you would want, forceful leftists going out there and, putting the president on blast to fight for it. It just seemed like there was not any type of appetite for that. And not as a journalist, but just as, a progressive, I could only assume that they were fearful of doing so because they felt they would be backbenched, in committees and other things.
No, I think that's right. And particularly with Bernie, I feel like Bernie felt like, he had the ear of a president for the first time in his life. And he wasn't willing to sacrifice that. And he felt like coming out against Biden on XYZ would sacrifice that. And I actually think he's wrong about that, because I think Biden knows that Bernie is Bernie. And if he saw Bernie on MSNBC saying Biden should, be fighting harder for X or whatever, I think Biden would be like, well, that's Bernie. But I think Bernie felt like he would be putting something at risk. On that American Rescue Plan,
Sean Fain refused to endorse him, and Biden went out on the picket line. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Biden understands people's roles. There is an interesting story in the book that points a way forward for this kind of left coalition from that American Rescue Plan. Actually, and this wasn't reported at the time, but so $15 minimum wage doesn't make it in, and there's absolute rage and fury about that, and people inside Congress can feel that, like they're checking in, they've got their finger on the pulse, they know how angry people are, and they did see the squad and Bernie forced a vote that needed 60 votes and only got 48, so it was widely denounced. It became this thing, and next Joe Manchin wanted to trim down who could get checks, who could get those direct checks, and also the amount of unemployment insurance that was going out. Because remember, Bernie got that what they called the super dole, extra $600 a month plus, expanding it for longer periods of time and making it more generous. And so Manchin is furious about that stuff. He wants to take that out next. Another thing that's in the book, AOC, when Trump was like $600 is not enough, we should do $2,000. She immediately introduced this bill to add $1,400, and then one of the clever things she did, she made it so that dependents would also get $1,400, whereas in the past, if it was $1,000, that might be only $400 for dependents. What she did, she equalized it for the first time, and so that $1,400 was then $5,600 for a family of four, and nobody really noticed that. It just kind of like moved into the bill. And you've got Manchin trying to trim all this stuff back. Jayapal and Schumer had built up a relationship over the last couple of years because there'd been some miscommunications between the House and Senate. So Jayapal and Schumer had a direct line, and they were talking, and she told him, she's like, look, I see Manchin's pushing. If you keep pushing, there's so much anger out there. The squad is going to walk. Like, I cannot promise you the squad if he messes around with these checks and this unemployment insurance. And so Manchin comes to Schumer. He's like, if you want my vote, you need to, trim this stuff to X. And Schumer tells him, look, love to, Joe, I cannot do that. Like, if I do that for you, Pramila tells me I lose the squad, and we don't have the numbers over in the House. And so now Manchin is faced with this credible threat because he can tell too how pissed people are. And so Manchin caved, saying, all right, fine. And he got some like piddling little concession around unemployment where like it balanced out in the end. Like it was a totally face-saving concession that they offered him. And the upshot of that at the end, people were actually just furious about it because they're like, they shouldn't be $1,400 checks. They should have been $2,000. That $600 that already went out shouldn't count because you were talking about $2,000, and $15 wage wasn't in there. but underneath that was there this like at least a model, for how you can actually leverage the kind of left anger that's out there to create a credible threat from the left to say like, no, these people actually will walk, because that's been the problem on the left when it comes to leverage for so long, that you had 60 Democrats in 2009 say, if there's no public option in Obamacare, I'm voting no. And then it comes from the Senate and they're like, yeah, by the way, we took the public option out. What are you going to do? And they're like, all right, I'm for it.
Right. Something else I wanted to zero in on, obviously AOC's in the title, but you spoke with other squad members. One of them that I kind of sort of know is Cori Bush, because I covered the murder of another unarmed black man in 2017 in St. Louis. And she was out there with other protesters before she was in Congress for a month, 2 months. And she was a rough rider. I mean, she was not fucking around. She was an activist in the community for many years. I know Rashida Tlaib was an activist before she got into Congress. I know you're not a psychologist, but Cori Bush, it seemed like there were moments when she was really in anguish because, like, she's an activist, and I think she came in really thinking, like, hell no, I'm gonna, stand my ground, and I'll vote no, and I'll be on the front steps of Capitol. Like, I'm not asking you to criticize her. I'm asking, like, what happened to kind of, in many ways, zap the activists out of these folks? Because the only thing they really did was that protest over the eviction moratorium. And a lot of people felt that they kind of did that because they had the Democratic leadership's blessing to do it.
I don't actually think that they did have their blessing to do it, but putting that aside,
maybe you could give people kind of what they were hit with to kind of they have voted no on some things, but overall they're not exactly out there on the streets either.
Yeah, I think one thing that is underappreciated, and not to put Cori Bush on the couch or anything, but is the interactions with Republicans. Like when you're fighting through a Democratic primary and you're living in a Democratic city, kind of your enemies are, for Bush, certainly police violence, and then the Democratic machine that is supporting that police violence. The Republicans are not really a thing. Like they're a thing out there in the country, but not in these deep blue districts.
Right.
You get into orientation, and Bowman talked to me about this too. Like in orientation, looking over and seeing like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like who you've heard about, and like wondering like which one of these are armed. These are different kinds of people. And then one of their first, they're sworn in, and then like the next day for Bowman and for Bush, the Capitol is ransacked. Right. And like this like mob of people like storms in. There's gunshots right off somebody's killed right outside of the House floor. And if you remember, the very first resolution or legislation, I can't remember which it was, that Bush introduced was to basically expel all Republicans from the House who had participated or that were tied somehow to January 6th. So like I do think that like getting into Congress as a Democrat, but then being confronted on a daily basis with the reality of the Republican Party, brings the Democrats closer together. Because now you're like this machine person that I was fighting back in St. Louis. At least they're with me against this guy, and that is deeply cynically weaponized by Democrats who were like, what are you going to do? Vote for Trump? But it also is a real experience to come face to face with this, like, proto neo-fascist element of a politics that you, if you live your life in kind of a progressive ecosystem, you think about, but you're not like interacting with on a daily basis.
So it's kind of like the leadership is almost preying on some of these folks' good nature.
Right.
That, hey, we might be, country club and corrupt, but they're QAnon.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And it's true. Like they are.
And let me ask you,
it's cynical, but it's also true. And so it's really tough.
Let me ask you specifically, because obviously they never like signed a contract that they would vote as a block. But obviously people expected on certain things they would at least communicate with each other, maybe organize. But then you have each one saying, I vote alone for my district. Can you kind of give any insight into the thinking behind that? Because I would have to think I use Cori Bush as an example. She's a single mom, relatively poor woman from that district. So I would think that there were cases that you learned about of Pelosi and others strong-arming them that if you don't vote for X, we're taking Z from you, or we're not giving this to your district. And that must be tough
absolutely.
if you're from the district.
Absolutely. Our system where you don't just represent a politics, an ideology, a segment of a coalition, but you represent, a specific 700,000 people from a specific area, is another thing that we don't think about much as kind of commentators from the outside about Congress. But once you're in there, and it is your job to represent these 700,000 people, as well as to do what you want to do, which is push your political revolution, whatever agenda it is that you brought there. Yeah, those are then kind of hostages that the leadership can shoot, say, oh yeah, you don't like this, well then, right, we're pulling funding from this community center, and the people in that community center, or the people in this who rely on whatever thing that is that they're going to hurt, and you also know people that can be benefited if more comes that way. And that's before you even get to the political implications of that, which is, of course, if bad things start happening in your district and get associated with you, then next time you get a primary challenge, which of course is her first time around, she's getting an extremely well-funded primary challenge. That's something that they hit you with. So that is indeed, serious amount of leverage, which is why there are caucuses and why people float the idea of sub caucuses and like banding together against that. But, the leadership is extremely good at just individually picking people off and right. all over the place. Like Marcia Fudge, they wanted Marcia Fudge to run against Pelosi for speaker. Pelosi sits down. She's like, what do you want? Marcia Fudge is like, I want to be subcommittee chair of this committee. Pelosi's like, you got it. Done. And then boom, this like organized effort to make her speak, to challenge Pelosi, completely neutered.
And what insight did you get from the squad on just kind of I don't know. I mean, since Biden's been in office, just based on being on the road, outside of the union resurgence, I'm just talking electoral politics, there's really been a deflated balloon effect. I mean, I recall covering Nina Turner's first campaign. I was not surprised, but, they didn't have a ton of volunteers from around the country like you saw with people storming in for Bernie. Some of that's from, certain YouTubers that, were preaching against the squad and, Nina Turner. But what have they noticed that there is a deflation among their base? I mean, Twitter could be deceiving, but among the people that knock doors for them, phone bang, donated, that are disappointed with them, because you see it in the polls now. Look at, that New York Times Siena poll, whether you want to call it an aberration or not, had Trump and Biden nearly tied among age 18 to 29. Right. That is the squad's base. Do they have, do they recognize that they've lost some of that base because maybe they haven't been aggressive as their base expected?
No, they definitely see a significant amount of kind of disaffection relative to what you saw in kind of the heyday of 2015 through 2018. Some of that is just cyclical. Others of that they chalk up to algorithms, dividing, that are corporate produced algorithms aimed at dividing people. But yes, to answer your question, yes, it's a real thing, and I think, and there is some real thought about where does it go from here. In the last chapter, I talked to kind of Corbin Trent, who well, I'm sure, who founder of Justice Democrats, her communications director for the first 6 months, left on not, left on not great terms. And his kind of look back, he's like, if we could do it over again, or if there was something that could have worked, he's like, well, first of all, we were so on our heels about Israel. Like the first 6 months, there was very little ability for us to move forward, which I think is not a coincidence. Like that's kind of why you do that. But he said the thing that he and Schroykot wanted to do was to get Bernie and the squad together to form like an entity that would raise money, not just for themselves, but then for future, progressive challengers, or in either open seats or against, say, an incumbent like Richie Neal, the Ways and Means chairman. You don't want to hold a hearing on Ways and Means on a Medicare for All. Well, we're gonna back this primary challenger. We're gonna raise money for him. And
they wanted to build an infrastructure, basically.
Right. And then every time that they get attacked, that infrastructure ends up raising money. Like whenever Bernie would get hit by Hillary Clinton, he'd raise $500,000 or something. You probably remember when Hillary Clinton endorsed Nina Turner, like that brought in like $100,000 for Nina.
Yeah.
Jim Clyburn brings in like 50,000. Like every time there's some kind of establishment move against them, people are angry, and you got to give them a vehicle to like punch back. And that was never something that Bernie was really going to be interested in doing. Corbyn's thought was like the only way it's going to happen is if AOC really like lobbies him hard on it, because Bernie had, and still has, I think to this day, like a deep respect for her, and also saw her as kind of the next carrier of the torch, and understood her as having insight into his supporters in a way that he didn't. Like he's very glad that he's got this giant youth following back then, but he didn't exactly know why. Like he joked to his aide, like, I'm like Mick Jagger, and he's joking, but he's like he doesn't quite get it, and he figures that these women do understand it. He sees them, like he loved the connection that he had with them.
Right. So
if they could use that sense of community and of respect, and persuade him then to use his credibility, his email list, his ability to draw people out to rallies, to build infrastructure that can then counteract the attacks, then maybe something could have been different. That's his kind of reflection, looking back on what they could have done. But for lots of different reasons, nothing like that ever came together. Like they eventually did do a squad victory fund PAC, but it raised just a couple $1 million, and it was used for the squad themselves rather than for other candidates. And then AOC eventually did do her own PAC called Courage to Change, which did endorse like some like Richie Neal had Alex Morse, so she like Courage to Change endorsed that. Courage to Change endorsed Jessica Cisneros down in Texas. But it was kind of just her, and it would often be later than those candidates wanted.
Right. Yeah. And my last question,
which interestingly, but to last point on that would draw her the same amount of anger from the establishment and from her colleagues in the House than if she had gone in bigger and gone in earlier. Right. And so in some ways she's trying to like work her relationships on the inside. And so she's staying back a little bit. She's not doing 30 primary challenges. She's only doing 5. But from a Democratic incumbent, 1 is too many. Like you do 1, you are finished. You're dead to me. So from Corbyn's perspective, he's like, you gotta go broke or go home. Like I think his phrase was, if we're not going to fuck with people, why are we fucking with people?
Exactly. That's kind of my last question, because it just seems like we're just going through this hamster wheel. It's not like in 2026, when we're in the midterms, there's going to be any less fascist candidates running for Congress on the Republican side. 2028, different shades of fascism we're always going to have. But the Republican, this is the most important election of our lifetime. Yeah, sure. I mean, there is serious threat from Trump talking about, I'll be a dictator on day one. But then you got Biden, funding genocide. So in your last chapter and kind of the way forward, is there a collective view like we got to play the long game here and keep chipping away and get more of us in there? Or do you think there's a chance anywhere for maybe a reconsideration of their approach and maybe, we want more progressives in here, but we need to be a lot more aggressive towards our establishment, Democratic establishment?
I think AIPAC has forced a reconsideration of, and going back to the roots of saying, oh, we actually do have to all band together here, because they're coming for all of us. And they actually probably won't come for AOC and Presley this time around. They're probably safe, but if AOC and Presley see everybody else wiped out, like that deeply marginalizes them. So in that sense, it's existential for them as well. And so there are organized efforts going on now to run by Justice Democrats to see what can they do to fight back against this coming potential $100 million onslaught from AIPAC. And if they can fight back against that and even grow, that could then be the lesson that they go back to and say, all right, let's do that again, and let's keep doing that, because we're in this together. We got to hang together. We'll hang separately.
Gotcha. Thanks so much, Ryan. Everybody should check out his book, whether you're a Squad fan, hater, Ryan fan, hater. He's a great reporter. We don't have a lot of actual reporters who actually find information and provide it to you.
It's a thing, yeah.
People bloviating out of their assholes. So check it out. It is The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution, out right now, right?
Yep. Came out Tuesday. You can get it now.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thanks.
You got it.
So that was Ryan Grimm. Before I bring on our new guests, I want to give a personal update on yours truly and my below. What's happening below me? Are you prepared? Yes, yours truly has broken 2 toes, is in a walking boot, and will be out of commission for at least 3 weeks. I wish I had a braver story, but in helping my wife move her riffraff of exercise equipment, I dropped her 5-pound weight on my toes. Broke 2. I am gimping around, but I'm okay. I could be a lot worse. People have it a lot worse in this world, particularly in Gaza. But I just wanted to let you know, if you're wondering why I'm not on the ground, it's because I broke 2 toes and I'm in a walking boot. On a brighter note, for this holiday season, we have a little discount for you. So, Colin, come on and explain this, because I failed math, but I believe they're getting a 20 to 30% discount on membership.
Yeah, it'll be, well, now I'll have to think about the math here, but yeah, it'll be it's basically 2 months free. So basically, if you look at this, you got either the $10 level, which you can either buy for yourself or for a friend. These are gifted memberships as well. Or we have the $5 level for $50, which both of those equate to 2 months free, essentially. So you can get those for yourself or for a friend for Christmas or whatever you celebrate. And you got to specifically go to statuscoupmember.com/store, and you'll see both of those options there.
Yes. And you could gift it too. So if you're already a member but want to gift a membership to a friend, your neoliberal aunt, your Republican uncle, there you go. StatusCoupMember.com/store. We'll put the link in the description. Please help us out, because we want to get back on the road as soon as possible. For me, probably the new year, because I can barely walk right now. But you're already seeing union campaigns. It was just announced that Volkswagen workers, non-union Volkswagen workers in Tennessee, are now starting a union campaign to join the UAW. So, hey, if we had more funding, maybe we could go down to Chattanooga, cover non-union auto workers that are now organizing to be union workers. It's not the sexy stories like Trump being a dictator and the Republican food fight debate, but these are the stories that actually make a difference, like the next one I'm about to cover. So as you know, we were on the front lines in Staten Island for over a year, covering the organizing effort that ended up being the historic victory of Amazon Labor Union becoming the first unionized Amazon, you might be wondering what the hell happened since then. I'm not seeing other warehouses organizing. I'm not seeing other warehouses winning. Well, they are organizing, and Amazon is trying to squash them like little bugs. Joining me now are the brave folks over at Amazon in Kentucky. You guys are at the Amazon Air Hub in KCVG, and you have been organizing, and you are having success, so much so that Amazon is bringing in the stormtroopers, and that would be the union busting consultants that pull you out of work, give you the lecture you on the birds and the bees, in many cases threaten you. So we're going to get into some of those union busting consultants. But first off, tell the audience, because the mainstream media is not covering you, when did you start your organizing campaign? How big is your location? What the hell is an air hub? And give people kind of the fundamentals of when this started.
Yeah, sure. So we launched our campaign in earnest 1 year ago, back in November of last year. We are organizing on the demands of $30 an hour, 180 hours of paid time off, and union representation in the ever-increasing disciplinary hearings that they're having out at the Air Hub. The site's about a little under 4,000 workers, and it's Amazon's largest Air Hub in the Air network.
So an Air Hub, just to lay that out, it's a freight facility, right? So Amazon planes come in, we unload them on the ramp, packages go into the sort building, Amazon workers handle all that material, packages go back out, and we're the ones who load that material, handle all of their goods, for their 2-day and 1-day shipping.
Gotcha.
As far as
go ahead.
As far as how many employees we got, estimated around anywhere from 4,000 to 4,500 employees. The union drive's been going pretty well so far. Collected over 1,000 cards, and seems like the movement's going strong.
And can you tell people, because I just covered Amazon fired one of the early union organizers in Staten Island, Connor Spence, because they came up with a bullshit, I think, illegal policy that you can't organize union activity when you're off the clock, which obviously is a problem because you're working. You can't really organize when you're, working. Have you seen that where Amazon has tried to stick you guys with you can't be here on your off hours, or try to make it difficult for you to organize when you're off the clock?
Yeah, so Amazon, officially they'll claim that they support their workers' right to join or not join a union. But what we've seen since November 7th is a massive escalation in union busting at KCVG. 11 workers, including ourselves, were given final written notices for setting up union tables at shift change outside the building. The building's kind of split between the ramp workers on one side and the sort workers on the other. So we'd set up tables, 5-6 times a week on either side of the building, collect union cards, talk to our coworkers about our demands, get people signed up and engaged on the campaign. We've been doing this since our launch rally on March 18th and have had, pretty minimal interference from management because they know that we're strong. They know that we have rights and we assert them. But going back to November 7th, we had a large display out with the blown up check, covering the $10 billion in profits that we've made this company in the last quarter this year. And they didn't like that. They had their new VP of Amazon Air Global on site that week to do a site visit. And all of a sudden, every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, they would send out security. They would send out Amazon operations managers to harass us, to intimidate us, and try to break our spirit in this fight. Lots on the line for both our coworkers and the company. Every dollar out of their pocket and in our pocket is something that they don't want to accept. Their retaliation's really escalated, and they're flying in union busters, some of the best in the anti-union industry, to try to stop this campaign, to try to intimidate workers, and try to scare them and prevent them from asserting their rights.
Let's go through this Hall of Fame of union busters here. You guys sent me a document because literally they're sending. I mean, the amount of money they're spending on these union busters, they could just give you the raise, maybe a holiday bonus, maybe a meal, and call it a day. I mean, it's insane. I think in Alabama during the Best Mayor campaign, they spent tens of millions of dollars. In Staten Island, it might have been hundreds. I don't know. But talk to us. Here you have Todd Nyerman, and he current job title, employee relations principal. So it sounds kind of official. He used to work, a former attorney at Littler Mendelsohn, world's largest employer side law firm. So union buster. Quote from Littler Mendelsohn founder: "Our clients pay a lot of money. If they want aggressiveness, they are entitled to it." And he, employer relations principal, brought in to consult on union avoidance. He has defended Amazon since 2012. Got a nearly $1 million house in Indiana. Boy, that looks like a mansion in Indiana. So let's start with him. What are these guys presented to you as they like work for Amazon, or it's told to you that they're from outside? How do they approach you? Tell us your engagement with them.
You could say a little bit to start.
Yeah, they do present themselves as like tier 7, which is like kind of management. They wear a red vest. Red vest means that you're part of management. They are part of Amazon, from what we know, contracted by Amazon to break up the union here. Like you said, they'd rather spend the money on these union busters and instead of giving us the raise that we deserve or the benefits that we're looking for. It just shows that, they don't want to lose their power, and they're scared of where we're at in our campaign.
Yeah, and I think, we've not just stood by while they're union busting. We had a march on the boss the other week, our second in the last couple of weeks, to demand that they stop their union busting. And, we marched on the main offices where the GM and the AGM have their offices there. And, we were confronted by Todd and another gentleman named Brian Kurtz. They were actually having a backdoor meeting with their union busters. And I think, the company knows that doesn't look great. Like at JFK 8, in Bessemer a couple of years ago, they were contracting these people out, right? So there were people walking around getting paid $3,000 a day to fight, on the company's side against the union. And so what they're doing now with these consultants is they're hiring them in. A few of these people, Brian, Todd, and others, very recently started working for this company, not to load a plane, unload a plane, not to work on the line, but to aggressively try and stop this campaign. So they can say that they're Amazon employees, but if you take one look at these people's history and their past, they're heavy hitters. I mean, Amazon, they're like assembling like the Avengers team of union busting or something here. It's pretty shocking, really.
And you have about 4,000 workers there. Obviously, it's Kentucky. Who knows? I mean, you could have conservatives, liberals, people who don't give a shit. But all in common, people are working paycheck to paycheck. People don't want to lose their jobs, and not everyone is as educated on their rights. So have you found that some of their tactics, because we know the union busting consultants like them like to say, well, if a union passes here, we might have to cut wages, or we might have to, cut staff. We can't afford it. Has that worked with some of the workers you're speaking to, or most of the workers you're speaking with kind of recognize that they're kind of the stormtroopers of Amazon?
Yeah. So it's no secret that Amazon built this air hub in Kentucky, specifically Northern Kentucky, because it's such a low union density area. So a lot of people have not had any experience with the union. And the experience that they have had was with the company like Kroger, which has a business union representing them. And so for a couple people, sure, it might work. But for a lot of the people that we've spoken to who know us personally, they know what we're all about, and they can see through the lies that management is spreading.
Gotcha.
Yeah, recently there's been a lot of meetings throughout Amazon that they've been having as far as the union busting meetings, and they see right through it. They see that they're hiring in these people. They see that they're spending the money on union busting instead of what they could be giving us. And people are just tired of it. They're seeing the truth, and Amazon's running away from what they can do.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, even deeper than the wages for Amazon, it's about power and control. And I think, you know, whether somebody's liberal or conservative, Republican, Democrat, or whatever, they see that. You know, I mean, we've got, you know, people involved in the campaign at work from all kinds of political persuasions, backgrounds. And I think, you know, what we'd be really clear on in this campaign is that we're workers. We're the ones that build, you know, all the wealth and value in this company. And, you know, it's going to take a strike to bring Amazon to the table. It's going to take worker action. It's going to take fighting back against their retaliation to do that. And I think, you know, for a lot of people, they see that and they recognize that it doesn't matter what their political, you know, affiliation is.
Let me ask you about that, because obviously you're not in Staten Island, but I'm sure you're aware there's kind of been a division. You had the Amazon Labor Union, Christian Smalls, you know, infamously was fired at the beginning of COVID for trying to organize. A lot of the original workers there who organized with him have kind of branched off to their own. They call it the ALU Reform Caucus because they had some disagreements on strategy. They believe we need to organize for a massive strike here in Staten Island. From what I'm told, Christian doesn't think that's the smart strategy. But the proof's in the pudding. I mean, they won the union almost 2 years ago. So April 2022, Amazon still not recognizing them as a you know, elected union and won't come to the bargaining table, which obviously, you know, I don't want to say deflates, but it's not great for other locations trying to unionize if you can't, you know, get that first contract and see, you know, have that settled there. Have you been in collaboration with ALU, the Staten Island founded union? And is there any thoughts on maybe going on strike yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, ALU shocked the world when they won their election at JFK in Staten Island last year. And that's something that inspired, you know, hundreds of coworkers at KCBG, you know, thousands of workers around the country, around the world. And, you know, it took an independent union started by Amazon workers to finally crack open this company and begin organizing on a larger scale. And I think for us, I mean, it's really simple. We want to build the strongest union for Amazon workers possible. And that means coordinating. That means coordinated action. That means fighting for the same things. You know, if they don't get a contract at JFK in Staten Island, yeah, that's bad for everybody in the movement. It's bad for the entire labor movement. And I think, you know, we got to take this all hands on deck approach. You know, with the UAW strike, all this momentum now, organizing at Tesla, you know, Honda, Nissan, and others, we've got to carry that forward. You know, just today, DHL workers across the street from KCBG, our workplace, went on strike because DHL, you know, is lowballing them in their contract fight, and they're not going to accept it. And I mean, just working on the ramp, KCBG, you can see, you know, the ramp at DHL right across the street. And, you know, got a lot of coworkers that used to work there, you know, have moved to our side of the street and that kind of stuff. And it just means a lot because that's what it's going to take on this company and fight them. You know, I think with the ALU Reform Caucus, some of the strongest organizers and fighters that won the election in Staten Island are a member of that caucus. And yeah, we've been open and discussing with them. You know, Connor Spence, Bree Masilla, and a few others have been out to go out to our workplace, you know, and help us organize and share the lessons of their victory last year.
And can you kind of talk about, because I saw when I was covering this Amazon organizing in Staten Island, obviously way different. It's New York City, but I mean, there was homeless workers sleeping in their cars in the parking lot. There was workers working 2-3 jobs. Kentucky has its wealthy pockets, but it's got a whole lot of impoverished pockets too. Tell me the stories between, you know, your own coworkers. I am assuming, you know, you guys are not Vanderbilts rolling
Not
in
exactly, no.
and badly need the benefits of a union.
Yeah, I'll speak from my experience. I started working for another warehouse, CVG2, which is also one of Amazon's return centers. I'm a DACA immigrant, so every 2 years I have to renew my permit. My permit was being renewed. I kept getting emails from HR saying that I had to submit documents of my renewed paperwork. I got an extension on my visa to keep working until my new visa came in. Submitted all the paperwork. Amazon told me I was good to go. I was still getting emails. Talking to HR, they said just ignore the emails, you'll be okay. I go in one day to clock in, and I had been suspended and later terminated from Amazon. Things like this is why we need a union to protect the immigrant community that we have here at KCVG. I don't want anybody like that is an immigrant to have to go through what I went through. You know, having to lose my job during the holiday seasons while I was waiting for my work permit to come in.
It's terrible.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it's Amazon workers anywhere in the world. You know, I mean, we're facing the same conditions, the same, you know, brutal peak season. And yeah, we all have a lot more in common, certainly, than the billionaire executives and CEOs of this company. And, you know, I mean, poverty in rural areas, you know, looks different, right, than, you know, poverty in a big city like New York, right? But a lot of the same stuff, right? I mean, you know, the first year I worked at KCVG, I took the bus out to work every day, you know, and transit's not so great in this area. You know, it's Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area. Take you 2 hours to get to work, 2 hours to get back home, you know, which looking at a 14-hour day with that. And, you know, I had a coworker of mine who doesn't work there anymore. She offered to give me a lift one day because the bus, you know, didn't come for whatever reason. And, you know, got in her car and realized pretty quickly that she was living in there. You know, she had all her stuff for her showers and extra clothes in there and stuff. And, you know, you wouldn't know, you know, talking to people at work sometimes what their situation is. And I think, you know, with the holidays right now, I mean, yeah, we're working brutal overtime schedule, especially in the sort building. Workers coming in 6 days a week, having to come in an hour early or half hour early, stay a half hour late. And it really grinds people down because we're not getting paid what we should be. And people anxious about, you know, shopping for the holidays, providing
what's
for
the
family.
what's the starting wage there?
It's up to 21 now.
21 now.
Which, you know, I mean, for this area, 21, you know, what they would say is an entry-level job, a non-skilled job. It's not so bad, but that's Amazon's business model, right? Like in Bessemer, they paid just a little more, you know, than the union shops in the area so they could get people in the door. But you find out pretty quickly there's no job security. It's not enough to pay the bills with inflation out of control, with the price of basic goods like, you know, milk, eggs, bread going up. And, you know, we're in this moment now where workers are fighting back. UAW, you know, the fight at UPS with the Teamsters. And we're at this moment now where workers are ready to put it on the line and fight for what they need. And that's why we're seeing a strike across the street at DHL. That's why, you know, over 1,000 of our coworkers and counting have signed union cards to start a union here. And yeah, that's the kind of momentum that we need to fight back and to get what we really deserve from these corporations.
Right. And I want to ask you, because with Amazon, it's a unique battle because it kind of taps into the overall American people's obliviousness or just lack of care. And what I mean by that is, you know, people want their yoga mat in 2 hours and maybe don't really need to know how it's coming to them. People want their Thursday night football, you know, which is now Amazon. Amazon spends a shit ton of money on these wonderful commercials showing immigrant who they paid for school, and the commercial ends with him looking out at the ocean. Amazon has a very, very well-oiled PR machine that makes people feel the company is warm and cozy, and therefore out of sight, out of mind, you know, in terms of how it's happening. There are a lot of celebrities, you know, do stuff with Amazon. I think that's part of the battle when you're unionizing, is kind of breaking that cognitive dissonance, because right now you're seeing all these protests in support of Palestinians. You know, I think we need to start raising that consciousness. So maybe we see some non-Amazon workers protesting, you know, maybe at Amazon football, you know, Amazon issued football games, or, you know, I'm just spitballing here, but can you kind of talk about your dealings? Do you think most people that you deal with in your family, your friends in Kentucky, know kind of what working at Amazon is, like how they're treating you like robots? So
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
get
I mean,
product?
Amazon's one of the largest employers in this region, I think in the top 4 or 5. And, so somebody has a cousin or a friend or a spouse, partner, or whatever that worked there or has worked there in the past. And we get this all the time, like family, friends, whatever, just people we meet out campaigning. Like, how can I support? Should I cancel my Prime subscription or something like that? And I mean, for us, it's like, we work for one of the most profitable corporations in the world, and we want to be paid a decent living. And I always tell them, like, I mean, will you donate 30 to Fight for 30 an hour at KCVG? And what we found, I mean, tabling around the city and with organizations like Workers Strike Back, doing tables, coordinated weeks of action around the country. Yeah, working people are willing to, donate 30 for 30, even more. We've gotten $100 donations, $50 donations to the campaign. And, we've raised over $50,000 that way. There's a lot of support out there. But I think, we just have to really convince people that the way to support workers at Amazon is to support this union drive and organizing around the country and around the world.
And I just put the link in our super chat. So if people want to donate any amount, it definitely will help. Colin, if you could put that in the description as well. I'd like to also ask about the National Labor Relations Board, which, people's eyes might gloss over, but that is the mechanism to win. It's different. Some states are better than others because they have offices all over the country. It was pretty decent in New York. As far as the Staten Island fight, they ruled in favor of the Staten Island workers quite often in terms of Amazon, illegally firing people, illegally union busting, etc. But that doesn't mean the NLRB is so strong everywhere. Not to get you in trouble with the NLRB, but what has been your dealings? Have you filed unfair labor practices with the NLRB? Are they responsive? In fairness to the NLRB, they are pretty understaffed for the amount of increased unionization efforts that is going on. Congress has not really funded them the way they should be funded. But have you found that if Amazon is union busting, NLRB has been responsive if you have filed with them?
So a lot of our unfair labor practice charges have taken a little while to come to fruition. There was one that we filed back in May in regards to being targeted for reporting on some bed bugs that were found in some of the crew vans that we're only just now filing affidavits for. But in regards to the union busting,
I just want to stop you for a second. This is a $1 trillion company, and they got bed bugs in their vans. Let that sink in.
Yeah,
$1 trillion company with bed bugs in the delivery vans, you're saying?
in the so out on the ramp is so large that we have to pile into essentially what would you call those,
like crew vans?
Yeah, crew vans. The same type of vans that you would rent to go cross country with your family, so that we can drive out to the ramp into all the gates. And for a little while there, especially in the summer, they get infested. Usually about once every 2 weeks, we get a van that has bed bugs.
Managers like calling in the exterminators there, doing anything?
They call in a dog to sniff around.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah.
To confirm the bed bugs?
Yeah.
But I don't trust that dog. I'm going to be honest.
There was a one
then
point
then you're bringing the bed bugs home.
Waiting the heat to kill it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the heat will kill it. Yeah, it's a bit like the sunlight killing the COVID or something. But
yeah.
Okay, sorry. So you filed with NLRB, and that still hasn't been responded to?
So they've started responding to some of our earlier ULPs, but as soon as we started reporting on the egregious union busting that we've been seeing as of late, they've been really stepping their game up a little bit.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
I think you kind of open talking about there hasn't been a lot of mainstream coverage of this campaign, and I think that's starting to shift a little bit. We have a lot of momentum. The company's stepping up their union busting. A few months ago, we were pretty much organizing without much interference from the company. And now there's a big spotlight on this organizing. And, the board's been pretty aggressive recently in moving these charges forward, and putting it back to the company to respond. So, we're hoping that, platforms like this, being on Status Coup and other outlets, more mainstream coverage too, that we can just keep pushing this thing forward and expose their illegal union busting.
and tell people kind of where things stand as far as, the National Labor Relations Board says you need to kind of collect enough cards where it's 30% of your workforce express interest, and then it will go to a vote. Amazon has so much turnover that a lot of times you get people to sign and then they're out the door. They're fired a few weeks later between seasonal workers and part-time workers and all the, different categories. But it sounds like from our conversations before that you have gotten a lot of interest. It's 4,000 workers and already over 1,000 have signed.
Well over 1,000, yes.
Over 1,000. Yeah.
So tell me about that. When do you think you'll have enough to go, and what other things are you doing? Because it's not just getting the cards; it's also like organizing, committees, etc.
Yeah. Recently, we've been organizing a lot of committees within KCVG. Whether it's you work plain side or you're working in the sort building, if you're working on the AR floor, we're trying to get people connected to talk to their coworkers about the union and try and get them to stick together for what it's going to take for us to be able to file for an election. We have a lot of coworkers who have signed, and we see in the near future filing to get an election here at KCVG. And we know that Amazon's going to ramp up their union busting like we've seen lately. They're going to keep spending millions of dollars to bust up our union, to silence our voice, because they're scared to lose their power.
And Griffin, I'm curious. Obviously, you got to crawl before you can walk, but it seems to me the Staten Island workers, it was an uphill climb just to get an election, much less win, but maybe not as much of a plan for the day after. I always said, winning an election is half the battle. Then you got to get these criminals to the bargaining table. I'm saying they're criminals. You don't have to. But what does it matter if you win if there's no
Right.
plan to force them to the bargaining table? So let's say you get an election, you think you have a good shot. You can't take your foot off the gas, obviously, after. So have you guys kind of thought about that? And what would be the plan after trying to organize a strike, other mechanisms?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been just in the labor movement in general, in the last couple of years, over reliance on the board to adjudicate these things. And, I mean, like you're saying, I mean, it's just the first step, to get enough cards signed, to have an election. And I think that's why, we have such a sharp focus on building out our committees, getting committees together, every department, every shift, night shift, day shift, swing shifts, all of this to get organized, even just to take simple actions. Like, we've had these buttons that we've been wearing for the last couple of weeks now to call out their union busting at KCVG, to name names. I mean, these union busters that they're flying in, that they recently hired in as Amazon employees, are the real deal. These are some of the highest paid union busters in the world. They've got a huge rap sheet, a lot of families, a lot of workers, left behind, that they defeated in their anti-union campaigns. And I think, having that kind of momentum, it's got to be sustained. And I think just from the very beginning, I mean, it's clear to us that this company is not going to come to the bargaining table without a strike. That's absolutely essential. And I think every step of the way, we talked to our coworkers about that. And now, with the strike at DHL, they're seeing it in real time, right? DHL, there were some illusions, I think, and they're a German company. Look at union density in Germany, and they'll play nice and they'll come to the table. There's a neutrality agreement between the union and the company, and we've been really clear-eyed about what we have to do. And now a few months later, after they won their election, the company's not bargaining in good faith, and workers have to go on strike and use their power to withhold their labor to try to win these concessions, to try to get a fair contract. And that's what it's going to take at Amazon. It's what it's going to take at JFK8. It's what it's going to take out here to bring this company to the table.
And obviously, it's a different story because UAW has, been established for decades. But besides being inspired by that strike, which obviously, it's not a perfect deal, but certainly better than they've gotten over the last 20 years. Did you learn any lessons from that? Because what I like is typically after elections where like a worker type candidate wins, people take their foot off the gas, after an election victory or a contract victory for unions. People go to sleep till the next contract is up, but they're putting their foot on the gas. They're already organizing in Chattanooga these Volkswagen workers to join UAW. They're trying to organize other non-union auto plants. So they're trying to build like a larger nonstop organizing campaign. And I also like that it seems they're trying to collaborate with other unions, you know, the flight attendants. They're trying to line up the expiration of their deal with other unions so that maybe different industries could go on strike at the same time. But, you know, what was your feelings about the UAW strike and maybe lessons learned from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal, right? I mean, working people have been losing for a long time. You know, the union movement's been crushed in this country for half a century or more. And I think, you know, it's a massive inspiration to give workers the confidence that they can actually have a say in their lives and actually fight for more. And, you know, I mean, at KCVG, yeah, there are people with families that were out on strike with the UAW. You know, I had one coworker who, you know, worked part-time at one of the parts distribution centers with UAW and worked at KCVG. So they go on strike. He's working here and talking union with people at work. And then he's going to the picket lines, you know, at the rest of his time when they were out. And, you know, I mean, this is manufacturing, this is logistics, all this stuff's tied together. And I think, you know, there's a real cumulative effect, I think, you know, and it just really inspires workers and builds their confidence to see these victories. And I mean, I think one more thing about the UAW contract is, yeah, I mean, they could have stayed out longer. They could have fought harder and gotten more, I think, and they could have struck at some of the larger plants. And, you know, toward the end, you know, some of the larger plants did go out on strike, you know, the Ford assembly plant and others with some of the, you know, some of their, you know, their kind of keystone vehicles. And, you know, a lot of those margins, if you look at the locals, 53% approved, they're really tight margins. And I think that shows that workers are expecting more, you know, and I think the next contract fight could be even bigger. And yeah, I mean, it's massively encouraging that they're starting this really ambitious union drive, you know, at Tesla and other companies. It's exactly what's needed to organize the unorganized and the labor movement. And I think, you know, we really see our campaign here as a part of that too, the organizing Amazon workers in these industries.
It's funny you say that because I almost think I was talking to a UAW worker when the final votes were happening. And I said, I think the lofty goals of 40%, which I never thought was going to happen, but I was glad that they said we demand 40%, might have in a way bit them in the ass because then it raised the expectations of workers, rightfully so. So you saw a lot of workers voting no because, hey, we got revved up 40% and we're getting X. So, yeah, you make a good point that it was a lot tighter than was expected. I have two logistical questions. If I come out there, I love seeing the union rat or the scab rat at some of these protests. Could we get a big blow up rat with Mitch McConnell's head on it?
Sounds like a safety issue. Is that a safety issue? Is that
okay?
Our union tables are a safety issue. So Scabby the rat. I mean, I don't know. They might call the police on us or something.
All right. I know you're not trying to be. I know you're not trying to be political.
Bring it out. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You know, a rat and McConnell. It kind of looks similar, so that would be interesting.
Absolutely, it kind of looks more like.
Yeah. What do you want people? Because I see with my viewers, people want more union coverage. They want to know more about efforts going on. What do you want people to do in terms of what you guys are doing? Because as far as I'm concerned, yeah, UAW is big, but I can't think of a bigger effort than trying to unionize more Amazons. And I'm not going to lie, there's been a drop off after Staten Island's victory. You know, I'll let people think for themselves, you know, who dropped the ball there. But at the end of the day, other than North Carolina, who I know is organizing, and a couple others that are thinking about it, you're the only ones right now making progress that I know of. So what are you asking people to do? Is it donations you need, volunteers, you know, people spreading, you know, raising consciousness that your campaign is going on?
Yeah, I'd say all the above.
Yeah, we definitely need contributions to our donation. You know, we are grassroots funded, so it's not like any of us are, you know, getting paid to do this or anything. We're all taking our time. We definitely need more of our fellow coworkers and community members to step up and, you know, stand up to Amazon. They're one of the nation's largest employers, and the way they've been treating their employees just needs to stop.
Yeah, and I think on top of that too, I mean, yeah, we've collected a lot of individual contributions from workers at our tables in the community and stuff like that. But if you're a union member and you're watching this, talk to your local. Like, we have model resolutions on our website. We've had a lot of workers, you know, pass these resolutions within their locals to donate, you know, anywhere between $500 to a couple thousand, you know, and we've had a lot of support from the local labor movement and, you know, union locals all over the country, Minneapolis, Seattle, Chicago, and others, to contribute to this fight. And I think, you know, that's what it's going to take. I mean, you know, it's a slogan of the labor movement, right? Like, an injury to one is an injury to all. And I think this is the time to make that concrete. You know, this is the time for us to really stand with each other and support organizing efforts like ours and other companies in the U.S.
Absolutely. And I'm putting your website up right now. So, Colin, if we could put that in the description too for people. So definitely go to their website so you could learn more about the campaign. You could, you know, enter your information there, ways to donate, ways to get involved. I'll say, listen, you're up against 10 Goliaths. Amazon is, you know, I think of, I don't know if you guys ever watch Good Burger. With Good Burger, and there's Mondo Burger across the street. Amazon is Mondo Burger. It is a villainous company. I'm not saying the workers are villains, but this is a company that, no exaggeration, treats its workers like robots. And if they could, I think they would just replace the workers with robots, which might be their plan down the road. So it's going to take more than the workers. It's going to take people outside supporting the workers. But I do think we need to get, you know, Amazon, the union organizing at Amazon back into the public consciousness. Tough during an election year, but, you know, we'll do our best. You guys have my number. So, you know, keep me in the loop. Whatever they're doing to union bust, any news, we'll report it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having us on.
Appreciate it for having us on.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
Yeah.
So those were the workers at KCVG in Northern Kentucky, the Air Hub. So that is one location organizing. I know another location in North Carolina is organizing. So I did interview them maybe last year, but I'll follow up with them, see where they're at. But listen, it's not enough just to win a union election if you can't get Amazon to the table. And I think they're exactly right. It's going to take a strike at more than one location. And that's tough when you are workers that work, you know, paycheck to paycheck. It's a scary thing. They could fire you. They definitely could bring in scabs. But a strike will definitely also bring in the media coverage, bring in outside people that aren't Amazon workers to support you. And if you ever want it, like Rose said, if you ever want a general strike, it's going to have to start with these workers at a lot of these companies, because it has a contagious effect in a good way when workers fight back, as you saw with the UAW. I know these non-union auto companies would have not risen wages as they have at Honda, Hyundai, Subaru, Tesla, Volkswagen, and we certainly know the workers at Volkswagen in Chattanooga would not be trying to form a union campaign to join UAW if not for UAW's stand-up strike. And I would expect to see other non-union auto shops starting organizing campaigns too. So we'll stay on this for sure. As far as I'm concerned, listen, it's not that we won't cover the election. I mean, we have to cover the election in some way, but I don't plan on covering it every day and 24/7, because I think this is where the most actual change could come from. Union organizing, strikes, 10-inch unions, workers fighting back, whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump, if there was a God and it was Cornel West or Jill Stein, that's a corrupt system. And you can't get massive structural change quickly through a corrupt system until you start chipping away at the corrupt system. And I think workers fighting back is how you chip away at that corrupt system. And workers threatening the wallets of these corrupt companies that have bought off our government, i.e. the United Corporations of America. Let me remind you, we got our holiday discount going on right now. So if you go to statuscoupmember.com/store, that's statuscoupmember.com/store, you will see the offer for 2 months free. So you sign up at the 1 year, and you sign up at the $10 level for $100 for a year. That's a $20 discount, because obviously if you just sign up per month at a $10 level, that's $120 if you put it out through the year. Same thing for the $5 level. We really, really want to see some revenue coming in to help us fund reporting into 2024 on labor strikes, union campaigns, tenants unions, workers being exploited, protests, et cetera, and whatever happens that we don't know about yet. So please, please sign up. If you're already a member and you have an extra, $50 or $100 to gift a membership, what better Hanukkah gift, what better Christmas gift, or whatever you celebrate than a Status Coup membership? So thank you so much for watching. If you didn't see it earlier, because we published it a little earlier than normal, I interviewed workers with Blue Cross Blue Shield. They kind of got buried a little bit in the UAW strike, but they were on strike for 11 weeks, and they just ratified their contract by 89%, ratifying the Blue Cross Blue Shield contract. They got higher wages. They got the progression to top pay down from a ridiculous 22 years down to 5 years. The two workers I spoke with, I would say they were skeptical of the deal, but they also talked about the merits of it. So go check out that interview if you're interested. Thank you for watching. We will see you back here tomorrow.